What's up, kings and queens? It's Dan from Daft Previews, back for another comprehensive preview of player picks for this upcoming 10-game slate. We had another profitable day, 1.3 units to be exact. So stick around for the recap at the end of this video, and I'll go through all the winning picks, why they were picked. I'll even dissect all of the losing plays, and I'll share what we learned from them L's. Now, I know that you guys love the detail of the last video, so in this preview, I'll be sharing the players who have the best matchups, and for all the undertakers, we'll keep looking at the players who have the worst matchups for their props. 10 games, a lot of time researching, and I hope you guys love it. As always, I'll be sharing my screen and take you through each player who's got a great matchup and a shit matchup based off the last 15 games. You know that I use props.cash to sort through all of this data, and I've got a special discount code for all of my viewers. You can sign up today using the code DAFT25 when you sign up. Let's go. Jumping into props.cash, we're looking at the Minnesota Timberwolves versus the Detroit Pistons. Now, Ant Edwards' game time decision at the moment, so Wolves lines aren't available, but there are some Detroit Pistons players that you need to take into consideration. The very first one we're looking at is Jaden Ivey, and we're looking at under 17.5 points. Now, one thing to mention with Jaden Ivey, he's covered this line in the 4 straight games since Cade Cunningham went down. He is up against some stiff competition as the Timberwolves allow the third least amount of points to shooting guards. So he's covered it in his last 4. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone 1 from 2, scoring 18 points in a matchup with them this year. Strong data to say that he should go over, but there's also strong data that says he doesn't. So for me, I'll be fading that one, completely avoiding that Jaden Ivey play. The next one is for Isaiah Stewart, and we'd be looking at under 6.5 rebounds. The Wolves allow the third least rebounds to power forwards. He does draw the Cat matchup, so if Anthony Edwards is out and Cat sees an increase in his usage rate, this is going to impact Stewart's ability to rebound the ball. He did get 7 rebounds in their last matchup. Looking at his last 10, he's covered this line in 5 of those games, averaging 6.6 rebounds per game. So, yeah, look, I would lean to the under on this one, but obviously I need to take into consideration whether Anthony Edwards plays. Another player with a difficult matchup from the Pistons is Jalen Duren. Now, he is a rebounding machine, covering this in 6 of his last 10, averaging 12 rebounds per game. He's up against Rudy Gobert, and the Wolves allow the second least rebounds to centers. So once again, his form tells me he can hit it. His form against the Timberwolves tells me he can't. His matchup is difficult. I'm going to give it a pass on this one. Let's jump into the next one. We're looking at the Orlando Magic versus the Atlanta Hawks. I believe this is the 3rd time they're matching up this year. Taking a look at Trae Young, over 27.5 points. His 27.5 points line is juiced, and I see a lot of bookies are offering 28.5 points. Now, the Magic do allow the 5th most points to point guards. Trae's covered this in only 4 of his last 10, but he did have a great game against the Spurs in his last one. He's done very well in his head-to-head matchups, covering a 4 of 6, averaging 30.5 points per game. He covered in both games against the Orlando Magic this season. The last one, I did bet on him to cover his line, and I think because of overtime, he managed to go over. So I was close to playing this one, but I chose not to. Given the line movement, given how sweaty the last time it was, it's not as if this has gotten easier for Trae Young, and the Hawks have been quite disappointing lately. They beat the Spurs, but they almost blew a 30-point lead. So very close lean on this one for Trae Young, but I'm not taking it. If you're looking at your parlays and multis, maybe Trae Young for 25. I'd be very comfortable with that, depending on what odds you can get. Another play in this game we're looking at is DeJounte Murray, but we're actually looking at an underplay on his points and his assists. So the Magic allow the 5th least points and the least assists to shooting guards. He's covered this in 3 or 5 games against the Orlando Magic, averaging 25.2 in those games. Looking at his last 10, he's covered this in 6 of his last 10 games, averaging 25.5. If you wanted to get, I guess, a bit more specific with it, you could probably look at the under in assists, but if his line is at under 3.5 will be very juicy if you're taking the under. But that line will probably move to 4.5. 3.5 is quite low, but at the same time, up against the Magic, he's only covered this assist line 2 out of his last 5 games, and he's gone under in his last 3. So there's DeJounte Murray. And another one who's got a great matchup. We're talking about Paolo Banchero. We're looking at his over 27.5 points. He's going to cover this in 1 of 6 games against the Hawks. in good news, the one he did cover in was his last matchup against them. In this particular game, no Franz Wagner, I believe. His line was close to 30 points in this one, 29.5, I believe. But he still covered nonetheless. Looking at his last 10 games, he's gone well under this in 4 straight games, but he has covered in 5 of 10 overall. The last time he did cover was against the Atlanta Hawks, believe it or not. But this game did go into overtime. So, yeah, I think the line is still quite high. He does have a great matchup, though. The Hawks are now the second most points to power forwards. But, yeah, high matchup for a player who only hits this 25% of the time. Even if we remove Franz from the equation, let me get him out here. So without Franz, he's only hit this in 2 of 6 games. So just because Franz is out doesn't mean he scores more. So averages 25 points without Franz. With Franz in the lineup, 22.3. So he only scores 2 more points per game. This line is too high for me. Even though the matchup's great, too high. Let's jump into the next one. We're jumping into the San Antonio Spurs versus the Boston Celtics. Now, Drew Holiday, Kristaps Porzingis, and Derek White are all game time decisions. Limited markets available. We've still got quite a few players to look at here. The first one is Jaylen Brown, and we're looking at his over in 5.5 rebounds. The San Antonio Spurs allow the second most rebounds to small forwards. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10 games, averaging 6 rebounds per game. And in head-to-head matchups, he's done quite well, covering in 2 of 3, 13 and 6 in his last 2 matchups against the Spurs. If Kristaps doesn't play, that probably supports this even more. Another player that we're looking at is Jason Tatum, and we're looking at it over in his points and rebounds. His line is quite high at 36.5. He's covered this in 1 of 2 games against the Spurs. Didn't cover in his most recent game against them. Looking at his last 10, he has covered in 5 of those 10 games, averaging 36 points and rebounds. So the Spurs allow the 6th most points and the 2nd most rebounds to power forwards. If you wanted to get specific, looking at his points line, it's 27.5. He's gone under in 3 straight. There is the blowout risk as well, but he's perfectly capable of lighting them up. Up against the Spurs, he's covered this in 1 of 2. So, yeah, look, quite a high line for me. A lot of things could happen that could get in the way of this. If we're going to look at his rebound line specifically, covered in 4 of his last 10, but up against the Spurs, he's gone under both times. So if you had to take an over, it would have to be Jason Tatum because of the matchup, because he hasn't rebounded well against him in the past. So that hopefully leans well to a Jaylen Brown rebounds prop. So, yeah, look, it's a strong lean for me at the moment. My final plays will be in the Discord, but I like the Jaylen Brown one. Jason Tatum, not so much. Sticking with the rebounds, though, we're looking at Trey Jones from the San Antonio Spurs. Over 2.5 rebounds. Now, the Celtics allow the 4th most rebounds to point guards. That's partially because Drew Holiday can't shoot. But looking at his last 3 games against the Celtics, covered it easy, averaging 4.7 rebounds per game. This line is obviously quite juiced, but also the 3.5 could be close to plus money. Looking at his last 10 games, though, Trey Jones, he's covered this in 7 of his last 10, averaging 4.3. So even if you were to take this at 3.5, you'd get much better odds. If you were to move it up, still covering 6 of his last 10. Is it out of the realms of possibility he can get 4? I think he absolutely can. But look, not something I'm willing to take right now. But once matchups, lineups, and all that are confirmed, it's definitely something I'm going to go back and look at. Sticking with the rebounds prop for the San Antonio Spurs, we're looking at Devin Vassell over 3.5 rebounds. The Celtics allow the 6th most rebounds to shooting guards. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10, averaging 3.6 rebounds. And in head-to-head matchups, he's covered this both times against the Celtics, 5 and 4. So very strong form there for Devin Vassell. But I think for all players in this game, the potential blowout is a risk. So I do like the Jaylen Brown one, for being honest. Out of all of these picks, Jaylen Brown is what I'm probably leaning to the most. But I'll wait to see whether Kristaps is going to play before I make a final decision on that. Let's get into the next one. Looking at the Milwaukee Bucks versus the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the first player that we're going to look at here is Jarrett Allen. We're looking at his points and assist prop. We're looking at an over. The Bucks allow the 4th most points and the 2nd most assists to centers. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10, averaging 22.8 assists per game. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone over in 2 of 4, averaging 18.5 points and assists. He only played 12 minutes in this matchup here, so happy to disregard that. So looking at his last 3, he's gone over 2 out of the 3. The one where he went under, He only played 27 minutes per game. So he's definitely capable of hitting this. Recorded 36 in his last matchup against them. I'm just going to have a look at his last 10 to see what his averages look like. So over his last 10 games, he's averaging 33 minutes per game. So provided this game can stay close, Milwaukee aren't really blowing teams out, unless it's the Boston Celtics. He's averaging 33 minutes per game. So if he plays more than 30 minutes, you can see that if he plays more than 30 minutes, he'll cover this line against the Bucks. If I break this down to points and then his assists, so points-wise, 5 out of 10, averaging 18.3 points per game. He scored 19 and 30 against the Bucks. Looking at his assists against the Bucks, 6 in his last matchup, and that's when the Bucks have had the Cavs have had a lot of injuries. So he's been heavily involved on the offensive side of things, racking up the assists. So both points and assists look great, provided he gets the minutes. To be honest, I really do like this play. 99% sure I'm probably going to play it. Just haven't decided whether it's going to be points or assists or if it's going to be both. But yeah, I'm really loving that play. Haven't found any reason not to play it, to be honest. Another play that we're looking at here is Giannis, and we're looking at his assist prop, but we're looking at the under. So under 6.5 assists. The Cleveland Cavaliers allow the third least assist to power forwards. He's covered this in 6 of his last 10, though, averaging 7.3. So he has had some strong games in there. Head-to-head matchups, he's gone under in 3 straight. He's averaging 5.8 assists in 4 games against them. So I don't really like unders. They're very stressful. And for someone like Giannis, he can rack them up very quickly. So, not one that I'm going to play, to be honest. Brook Lopez, looking at him, and we're looking at it under in his rebounds prop. That's because the Cavaliers allow the 6th least rebounds to centers. He did crush this line in the last matchup against the Cavs, though. So he's covered in 2 of his last 5, averaging 6. And in his last 10 games, he's covered this in 5 of those 10 games, averaging 6.3 rebounds. And look, when he does go under, it gets very close. So if you were to take this bet, it'd be extremely sweaty, and that's not my vibe. Let's jump into the next game. So jumping into the Houston Rockets versus the New York Knicks. Jalen Brunson and Josh Hart are game time decisions, so there's a limited market here on the Knicks players. But there's 3 Rockets players that do have an interesting matchup. The very first one's Jalen Green. You'd be looking at under 17.5 points, and that's because the New York Knicks allow the 2nd least points to shooting guards. He's had pretty good form as of late, covering 6 of 10, averaging 19 points per game. In head-to-head matchups, he's gone 1 from 2, averaging 17.5 points. The game he did go under, still scored 16 points. Not really loving this. Not really loving unders, to be honest. But when the numbers look like this, I think the line is right, and he's going to probably finish somewhere close to that. So I'd prefer to avoid it. Another under that we're looking at, though, is Jabari Smith Jr. We're looking at his rebounds prop, 8.5. The Knicks allow the 2nd least rebounds to power forwards. In his last 2 games, he's had rebound numbers of 2 and of 11. So that just shows you what he's capable of. Over his last 10, he's covered this 5 times, averaging 8.7 rebounds per game. So, the data's not telling me too much. He'll pick up the Julius Randle assignment most likely. It depends if Brunson plays as well. So there's too many factors right now for me to even consider this play. But matchup-wise, it's not a great matchup if you're looking at his rebounds. I guess one thing to consider with all the unders that I'm sharing, I'm not saying to take the bet on the under. I'm not proposing that. What I probably ask you to consider is if I'm saying that they have a bad matchup and the form says that he may or may not hit it, what I'm saying is probably just don't play it whatsoever. Just maybe avoid the pick, because I'm not saying they will go under, but if it does go under and it's because they have a bad matchup, well, fuck, I told you so. You know what I'm saying? But we've got another under in this one, and it's Alperen Şengün. We're actually looking at his points and assists in this one because he has a difficult matchup with both. The Knicks allow the 6th least points and the least assists to centers. He's covered this in 5 of 10, averaging 28.1. The head-to-head matchup, he's only got 1 against the Knicks. He only recorded 12 points plus assists. He played 28.4 minutes in that game. But this was last season, and he's a completely different player now. Looking at his last 10, though, what I want to talk through is his assist numbers, because the Knicks allow the least assists to centers. He's only covered that in 4 of his last 10 games, averaging 4.3 assists per game, and he's gone quite under in a lot of them. So Fred VanVleet is taking a lot more control on the offensive side of things. I would lean to take the under, but just in his assists for this game. Jumping into the Miami Heat versus the Toronto Raptors games, and there is a lot of players with either great or shit matchups in this one. So let me breathe for a second. The first one we're looking at is Kyle Lowry, and we're looking at over 3.5 assists. The Raptors allow the fourth most assists to point guards. He's covered this in 5 of his last 10, averaging 3.8. In head-to-head matchups, he's only covered this in 1 of 5. He's gone under in 4 straight. Looking at his minutes, he's either playing 35 or 25 minutes. If I break down his last 10 games, though, we check to see how many minutes he has played. Look, they are rather inconsistent. He can go up over 30. He can play about 16. So, yeah, look, I'll be fading this one. You don't know how many minutes Kyle Lowry is going to play. And I think that's a strong indicator whether he's going to get that involved or not. But another player with a interesting matchup is Tyler Hero. And we're looking at his rebound prop in this one. It's 5.5. And the one thing I want to call out is his rebounding numbers over his last 10 are great. 7 out of 10, 6.1 rebounds per game. But the Raptors allow the third least rebounds to shooting guards. It feels like Tyler Hero doesn't give a shit about this because in his head-to-head matchups with them, he's covered in 2 of his last 3, averaging 8.7 rebounds per game. Yet to verse them this season, though, so pretty interesting to see how he goes. The Raptors have changed their team a little bit since they last matched up, so this is probably one that I'll just watch. I don't believe he'll go under or over. I've got no preference at the moment, but the matchup is interesting. Jimmy Butler's got a good matchup for this one. Looking at his points, the Raptors allow the 5th most points to small forwards. He's covered this in 2 of his last 4, but he has gone under in his last 2. In his last 10 games, he's only covered in 4 of 10, averaging 20.8 points per game. So I don't believe I've taken a bet on Jimmy Butler at all this season. I feel like he's rather non-existent. We haven't heard any headlines. He hasn't done anything major, I don't believe. Probably waiting to the playoffs, and that's if they make the playoffs. So, yeah, he's got a great matchup, but shit, I wouldn't touch Jimmy Butler right now. I don't know what he's thinking. So, someone I would consider taking, though, is Bam Adebayo. The Raptors allow the 5th most points to centers. Bam's covered his 22.5-point line in 4 of 10 games, averaging 21.2 in that span. But similar to some other guys, he has played terribly against the Raptors. He's gone under in 3 straight. So a lot of this game, you're going to find the matchup is shit, but how they've played against this team in the past contradicts that. So it's not necessarily clear cut. And look, to be honest, Miami Heat games are shit to bet on in general because you don't know who's going to do what, who's going to pop off. The Raptors, probably one of the better teams to bet on because you know who their core 4 players are. If you wait for one of them to have a good matchup, they'll generally go over it. But Miami Heat tend to fuck everything up. Not only do they, can get a big night out of anybody on any given night, they're also a good defensive team. So a lot of the oppositions don't have good matchups. So, not sure about Bam. And if we head over to the Raptors players, we're looking at Emmanuel quickly here. And we're looking at an under for his points and assists. And this is another example where his form doesn't align with what's actually happening in terms of the matchup. Looking at his 8 matchups against the Miami Heat, he's only covered this once, averaging 15.3. But keeping in mind, all of these games, he was in a Knicks uniform. So very different role. He's starting now. The Heat allow the 5th least points and the 6th least assists to point guards. So if we look at his last 10, he's only covered this in 4 of 10, averaging 22.8. I believe the Cleveland game was his first game with the Raptors. So since that point, he's been doing quite well in covering this. His minutes are they're not consistent, actually. Sometimes he plays 25, sometimes he plays 36. So, yeah, look, difficult one for me to really decide on. If you wanted to maybe just look at one particular prop, I think his points prop is close to 20. He has been a bit more reliable in that regard. And in terms of assist, relatively inconsistent. He had a good patch, and I remember a lot of people started to bet on him here, and he's been killing them ever since. So, Manuel quickly, I don't know what he's going to do, but he's got a difficult matchup, but he's perfectly capable of still covering his points line. I'll tell you that. Scotty Barnes. I know a lot of people got burnt on this particular play not too long ago. In this game against the Boston Celtics, his line was 6.5. And I saw a lot of people pick Scotty Barnes to go under that. The reason why is because of this. So that Cleveland game was the first game that Barrett and Quickly played. Ever since that trade happened, Scotty Barnes went under his rebound line every single time.
And that's because he played point guard, moved to power small forward. Like, he was playing all over the place and he wasn't getting rebounds. A lot of people took his under in rebounds against Boston, and look at that. He smashed them with 13. The matchup for this one tells me that it's going to be difficult for him because the Miami Heat allow the second least rebounds. But look, shit, I wouldn't touch Scotty Barnes right now in his rebound prop because this is ridiculous. I don't know what you can get out of this. But Pascal Siakam, he's got an interesting matchup here because there's an under you can consider, but there's also an over. The first one's in regards to his points. So the Miami Heat allow the fourth least points to power forwards. He's covered this 20.5 point line in 7 of his last 10 games, averaging 24.7. Against the Miami Heat, he's covered this line in 4 straight games, including a matchup earlier this season where he scored 30. So even though the matchup says it's going to be difficult, Pascal Siakam says, fuck your matchup. I'm still going to cover the line anyway. So if you're looking at his assists, though, the Heat allow the third most assists to power forward. So that tells me we should look at an over. Over 4.5 assists for Pascal. He did cover this in 4 straight games against the Miami Heat, averaging 6.5 assists in those games. So all signs point to yes. But then you look at his last 10, and then he's inconsistent as shit, covering in only 4 of 10 games, averaging 4.6 assists per game. Since the Cleveland, not the Cleveland trade, but since the trade with the Knicks, starting from the Cleveland game, he's only covered this line twice. So his recent form says take the under. His form against the opponent and the matchup says take the over. I don't know what to do. This game is confusing the shit out of me. So I'm probably just not going to play anything on that Heat versus Raptors game. That can go get stuffed. Let's get into the next one. We're jumping into the Charlotte Hornets versus New Orleans Pelicans. First player that we're looking at here is CJ McCollum, and we like he's over in 3.5 rebounds based on the matchup. Keeping in mind this line is quite juiced, so the question is, would we take him for over 4.5? Well, the Hornets allow the second most rebounds to point guards. Over his last 10 games, he's covered the 3.5 and 4.5 lines 6 out of the 10. He's averaging 4.6 rebounds per game. In head-to-head matchups with the Hornets, he's covered this line twice, 6 and 5, averaging 4.3 rebounds per game. So whether you take this at 4.5 or 3.5, the hit rates remain the same if we're looking at head-to-head matchups and his last 10. So you might be better off taking the 4.5 and maybe getting plus money for it. The next pick, look, I am leaning that, but shit. A lot of players playing tomorrow. So that's a strong lean from me. Brandon Ingram, he's an interesting matchup too. So looking at his points prop, obviously he's been terrible. This black line indicates what his line is, this dotted line, and his line has just plummeted recently, and he still failed to get close to that. But his line's now 18.5 points. It's the lowest it's been all season. He does have a terrible matchup with the Hornets allowing the least points to shooting guards. His recent form is terrible. His head-to-head form, well under in his last matchup against the Hornets. But prior to that, he was absolutely smoking them. So I'm actually betting on Brandon Ingram to go under in this one. It is one of the bets that I'm going to share a little bit later, so I can go into a lot more detail with that. Zion Williamson, we're looking at under 28.5 points and rebounds for this one. And that's because the Hornets allow the third least points and the least rebounds to power forwards. Looking at his last 2, he's split it 1 from 2, averaging 26.5. Over his last 10, he's covered this line 7 out of 10 games, averaging 28.4. So he's actually been playing quite well. So the matchup is difficult, but look, realistically, the Hornets difficult for anybody. I can see a lot of New Orleans Pelicans having a great day here. So, yeah, I will probably say avoid the data that says this is a difficult matchup because Zion's told us against his team he's fucking smashed them in the past, and recently he's been killing it. So, contradicting data means I'll most likely not play anything. Jonas Valanciunas, he's got an excellent matchup on this one. This matchup is honestly too good to be true, in my opinion. And let me explain. So the Hornets allow the most points, second most rebounds, and the third most assists to centers. Jonas has only covered this line in 4 of his last 10, averaging 22.6 points per game. But check out the performances that this man has put on this team in the past. 51, 42, and then a month ago, 46 points, rebounds, and assists. He's absolutely destroyed them. So I'm strongly considering, I'm not probably not going to just play his over in this one because his recent form tells me he can get it, but he can also shit the bed because a lot of it is really dependent on minutes. If you have a look here, sometimes he plays less than 20 minutes per game. In those games against the Charlotte Hornets, he's playing, where is it? He's playing 33 and a half minutes. So in those games against the Hornets, he gets a lot of game time. And I don't know if it's a fitness thing, a rotation thing, but in his last 10 games, he's playing 20 minutes per game? That's the risk here. So 22 minutes per game is what he's averaging. So I do like his over in his PRAs, but I'd probably just like to play a value play. And this is what I'm thinking. I haven't put it on yet, but this is definitely what I'm thinking. I'm going to put money that there's a chance he replicates what he's done in the past. So what we're talking about here is at least 20 points. He scored 29 of them earlier this year. So you can look at 20 to 25 points. Rebounds, look at this, 17, 19, and 13. His rebound for this line in this game is 9.5. So you could look at 20 points, 12 rebounds. And if you want to look at his assists, we take the over in assists. We take him for 2 assists or maybe even 3 assists on Bet365. And then we'll see what we come up with. So I'll play with that after the video. I'll share it in the Discord to see what I'm on. But I'm not going to play his PRAs. I do like it, but I think the risk is probably just best take the value play because if he's not going to hit his PRA, the value play is smoked anyway. The value play, we're only putting a small outlay. I can either see Valanciunas destroying them or doing fuck all. So that's my thoughts on it. Let me know what you guys think. But his form against the Hornets is crazy, but his recent form is not. What's another pick? We've got LaMelo Ball, and we're looking at an under in his rebound prop. And the reason why is because the Pelicans allow the least rebounds to point guards. He's got no matchup with them, so he either hasn't played against them in the last 2 years. Looking at his last 10 games, though, he's covered this in 6 of 10 games, averaging 6 rebounds per game. He's 2 games back from injury, 3 rebounds against the Spurs, and then 10 against the Miami Heat. So we don't know what's going on there. LaMelo Ball, I'm just personally just watching him right now. I wouldn't bet on him. He's just back from injury. Who knows what's happening? And the last one in this game, in terms of matchups, you're looking at Miles Bridges, and we're looking at under 19.5 points. His recent form is bloody crazy. 8 out of his last 10, he's covered this line, averaging 21.5 points per game. He's got one matchup against the Pelicans this season. He scored 27 points against them. But the matchup tells me that the Pelicans will have the second least points to power forwards. So another example where there's too much contradicting information, you could either say, fuck what the data says, this guy can ball against them, or you can say, I don't care how well he's been playing. I don't care how well he played against them a month ago. Over the last 15 games, the Pelicans have been locking power forwards down. So that's up to you. Leave it up there for you guys to consider, but I'm not making any play on Miles Bridges. Let's get into the next one. So we're looking at the Warriors versus the Jazz. And in terms of matchups, there's not many people that have a bad matchup, and there's not many people who have a great matchup. So I've only got 2 players to really discuss from this game. The first one is Simone Fontecchio. Now, the Warriors allow the most points to small forwards over the last 15 games. Fontecchio's last game against the Warriors, he scored 18 points. Over his last 10, he's covered this 5 out of 10 times, averaging 9.5 points per game. I did have a quick look to see what's happening in this Warriors game. He must have played a lot of minutes, right? Not true. He only played 19 minutes in that game. And over his last 10 games, I think he's averaging about 19 minutes. That's a lie. He's averaging 27 minutes per game. So over his last 10, he's averaging 8 more minutes than what he did when he played against the Warriors last time. The Warriors don't defend small forwards very well, but they've only set the line at 7.5. Is that a strong reaction to his recent form? Potentially. But I also think when I dug a little bit deeper, this 18 points he scored against the Warriors, it came in 19 minutes. He made 6 out of 10 shots, right? But check this out. He made 3 out of 6 3-pointers. So he smoked them from deep. Shots per minute, that's really high. Like he was taking a shot every 2 minutes that he was on the court. But yeah, look, could potentially be a ladder opportunity here, but does he shoot that well again? Do the Warriors continue to struggle? I'm pretty sure that they do because they've been struggling hard. But yeah, it's an interesting one. If he scores 15 points tomorrow, I'm going to be kicking myself I didn't take that because that's going to be juicy. Another player, though, Andrew Wiggins. So he's back in the starting lineup. We're looking at an under in his rebound prop for 4.5. His last matchup with the Jazz was in November of 2022. Got 9 rebounds. He's a very different player now. Looking at his last 10 games, though, he's covered this in 3 of 10. He's been starting for the last 3. So he's covered in 2 of those 3 games. The Jazz allow the 7th least rebounds to small forward. So it's not a real strong indicator at the moment. I think the line is just about right. So there's nothing in here that tells me he's, there's a good chance there's EV that he's going to go over or under. So I'm probably not going to watch that Warriors or not even going to track it whatsoever. Actually, that's a lie. I'll track Fontecchio, and if he scores 15 points, I'm going to kick myself in the face. Let's get into the next game. We're looking at the Dallas Mavericks versus the Los Angeles Lakers. Luka and LeBron are game time decisions, so there's not many markets. Typical Lakers bullshit. You can't bet on their games early because we don't know who's going to play. But we're looking at Luka Doncic, and you're looking at his points line here of over 33.5 points. The Los Angeles Lakers allow the 4th most points to point guards. Luka's averaging 33.6 points per game this year. He's covered this line in 7 of his last 10, averaging 35.8. Against the Lakers, he's only covered this in 1 of 5 games. He's performed quite well, but hasn't performed well enough to cover this line consistently. Only covering in 1 of 5, averaging 31.2 points per game. Coming off an injury, I wouldn't be brave enough to take him if he does play, but at the same time, the matchup is good. But I do think if Luka is out, then a Kyrie Irving over is probably a great pick right now. His form is crazy over this recent stretch without Luka. Obviously, the Lakers don't have much defense in their backcourt. So a Kyrie over if Luka does not play, but Kyrie's line will probably be set at 33 points if Luka doesn't play, to be honest. But look, Kyrie's shown us he's definitely capable of hitting that in his recent games. So yeah, it's definitely one to consider depending on how the matchups and lineups finalize. Another player, I was very close to sharing this as one of the best, one of my bets for this game. And that's because all the stars are aligned. It's D'Angelo Russell, and we're looking at under 17.5 points. The Dallas Mavericks allow the 3rd least points to point guards over the last 15 games. D'Angelo Russell has versed the Mavericks 5 times in the last 2 seasons. He's averaging 10 points against them, and he's never covered this line. Looking at his last 10 games, he's only recently been promoted to the starting lineup. But in these last 10 games, he's averaging 15 points. He's only covered this twice. He had that outburst against Utah, played all right against Phoenix, and he sucked every other time. So it was a very strong lean for me to take the under here. But again, you don't know if LeBron's going to play. That means more shots, opportunities for D'Lo. So yeah, I was close to playing it, but the lineups are pretty important for that particular play. The next one, we're looking at Stone Cold Steve Austin Reeves. And we're looking at his PRA in this one because he's got an excellent matchup across the park. The Mavericks allow the most points, the 3rd most rebounds, and the 3rd most assists to shooting guards over the last 15. You can see that he's covered this in 5 of his last 10 games, averaging 24 points, rebounds, and assists. In his 5 games against the Mavericks, he's covered this twice. The 2 games he did cover were the games that they played this season. So very strong form against the Mavs this season with 29 and 35 PRAs. LeBron may or may not play. And I think if he does, I think he's still very capable of hitting this line, but how he hits it will probably be very different. He does become a lot more of a facilitator when LeBron is out. But if D'Lo is going to be starting with him, he really probably is going to become a scorer. So I think his points prop is the better play. It is one of the bets that I'm playing, so I'll share more about Austin Reeves a little bit later. LeBron James, if he does play, his rebound matchup is great. The Mavericks allow the 4th most rebounds to power forwards. Against the Mavericks, he's covered this in 4 of his 5 games, averaging 9.4 rebounds per game. Over his last 10, the form hasn't been as good. He's only averaging 5.7 rebounds a game in his last 10. He's only covered this line twice. But you could argue that his matchup hasn't been this easy over the last 10-game stretch. So LeBron to get rebounds, if he does play, it's probably something I'll be leaning towards. Maybe to take him for 6 in a multi or a parlay. I'm not too sure. The next one is Anthony Davis. Anthony Davis's lines are through the roof, I've got to tell you. But we're looking at his rebound prop for this one. The Mavericks allow the 4th most rebounds to centers. They're very small at that center position. They've got, actually, Maxey is Maxi Kleber is back, but at the same, he's nothing when it comes to AD. So looking at his last 10, he has only covered this in 4 or 10 games, which is ridiculous given his size, athleticism, and everything like that. He's averaging 11.4 rebounds in that span. In head-to-head matchups against the Mavericks, he's gone under in 3 or 4, averaging 12.3 rebounds per game. So that 13.5 is a bit too high for me to take. His point sign's like 27.5 as well. Look, I do think Anthony Davis has a big game, but not at these lines. I wouldn't be willing to take them. Let's jump into the last game. We're looking at the Brooklyn Nets versus the Trailblazers. Now, DeAndre Ayton and Malcolm Brogdon are game time decisions, so not as many markets for Portland. Michael Bridges has a good matchup in this one, and we're looking at his rebounds plus assists, and that's because the Blazers allow the second most rebounds and the most assists to shooting guards. Problem there is Bridges hasn't done this very well against Portland lately. He's gone under in 3 of his last 4, averaging 7.5. In his last 10 games, he hasn't done a great job either. He's only gone over in 3 of 10, averaging 8.3. He smashed it against OKC. He smashed it against them twice. He's done it against Miami. But all the other games, he's gone well under. So, yeah, he's capable, but shit, that form ain't great. It doesn't give me confidence. So it's something I'm not going to touch. And the next one is for Anthony Simons. And we're looking at his rebound prop, I believe. Actually, no, it's his assist prop. Over 5.5 assists. The Nets allow the 4th most assists to shooting guards, but Simons has not been doing this at all. In head-to-head matchups, though, he's made it happen. He's covered in 2 of his last 3 and in 1 game earlier this year. But, yeah, Portland are very tricky at the moment because we don't know if Brogdon's going to play. That's going to eat into some of Anthony Simons' usage rate. Scoot Henderson has been playing a lot more minutes, getting a lot more opportunities. His usage rate is very high. So, yeah, look, not one that I'm willing to play. If I'm being honest, it's another game that I'm not going to watch. So that's a wrap of the preview of the 10 games. And oh my Lord, am I tired. That was in-depth as shit. So please let me know in the comment section, do you want more of that? Because that took me a long time to research, taken me a long time to record, and it's going to take me even longer time to edit. But if you love that shit, you let me know and you smash that like button for me. Before we get into the best bets that I do have, I've got 3 of them that I want to share with you. I want to give a shout out to RockBeast4291 for the super thanks that he left me in the last video. He said, thanks for such good in-depth videos. I appreciate it. So it's a very simple comment, but I wanted to give a big shout out because that was a super thanks. And to be honest, I didn't even know what a super thanks was until that came through. But apparently I've leveled up in terms of YouTube where I'm eligible for special emojis, likes, donations, that type of thing. So RockBeast4291, you are a Daft Preview super fan now. And with that donation, I thank you. But look, being for real, I would never ask anybody who watches this to ever donate to me in this channel. I love the learning process of creating this content and the value that it offers. It also helps me in my personal betting because, you know, I'm up 120 something units this season. It's because I go into such depth to find these picks. And because I run this channel, I go even deeper. So if you do want to support this channel, I do ask that you like, you sub, all that good stuff. And if you do a super thanks in there, I'll give you a shout out in every single video, every provider they keep coming in. But I'm not asking you guys to do that. Just like it, share it, sub, all that good stuff, and I'll be a very happy chappy. Now let's get into those best bets. The very first one that I'm playing is Brandon Ingram under 18.5 points, and I got that for $1.80. That's minus 125 for you guys in the US. So Brandon Ingram has covered this line in 68% of games this season, averaging 21.4 points per game. This line is so low compared to his averages over the past few seasons. He's currently going through one of the worst shooting slumps of his career over these last 7 games. From the beginning of the season until December 31st, Ingram was shooting 50% from the field, which would have been a career high. Plus, he was shooting almost 35% from deep. As soon as we clicked over to 2024, those numbers dipped to 42% from the field, which is his lowest since his rookie season, and under 30% from beyond the arc. So Brandon Ingram's slump, it's not just about missing shots. You can see it in the graph that he's not aggressive. He's not taking shots either. The Pelicans, they've also had some blowout victories, of course, where Brandon Ingram hasn't played the fourth quarter. However, in other games in January, you can see that he just lacks the aggressiveness on the offensive end. So far, he's averaging 11 shots per game in 2024. In the 30 games he played before January, he attempted 11 or less shots only 3 times. So 27 out of 30 games, he shot more than what he's averaging so far in January. So he's clearly not aggressive with it. Now, if we look at how he's shooting, where he's shooting, Brandon Ingram, he shoots the second highest percentage of his shots between 15 and 19 feet. Over the past 7 games, Brandon Ingram is shooting only 22% from that distance. His mid-range is ass. He was averaging 50% in that same area last month, prior to 2024. The similar numbers, even if he gets closer to the basket, when he's shooting at 5 feet and away, he was averaging 53% at the moment. Prior to that, he was shooting almost 71%. So his shot percentage has absolutely tanked. His shot attempts have absolutely tanked. And I don't know if this is mental. There's obviously some blowouts happening, of course, but he's in the worst slump that he's had in a very long time. I guess the risk in this play I've taken he's under is that he's up against the Charlotte Hornets, who are by far one of the worst teams this league has ever seen. But the reason why I'm still taking this bet is that they have allowed the least points to shooting guards over the last 15 games. I had to double check that because that didn't make any sense to me. They're terrible, but they don't allow shooting guards to score. Maybe that means they allow everybody else to score, and I hope that is true. But there's also the probability that the New Orleans Pelicans blow out the Charlotte Hornets and Brandon Ingram once again doesn't play in the fourth quarter. So all the numbers are stacking up. And if this is the game that Brandon Ingram breaks out of this slump, I'll live with the result. So be it. I'm also running a half a unit on this value play for Brandon Ingram. I'm running it on Bet365. I'm taking him for under 13.5 points, for him to go over 3+ rebounds, and for him to get 7 assists. So I'm getting $10 odds, which is plus 900 for those of you in the US. So he's gone under this points line of 13.5 in 5 of his last 7 games. So I'm really looking at this poor stretch of his. He's covered 3 rebounds in 90% of the games he's played this year. The other risk in this play is the 7 assist line. He hasn't covered that in his last 10, although he has covered 7+ assists in 3 consecutive games against the Hornets. So the Hornets aren't great defensively, so the points will come. Hopefully Brandon Ingram is setting them up and not finishing them for this bet to cash. The next bet I want to dive deep in for you, I'm looking at Austin Reeves over 14.5 points. I got this for $1.96, which is minus 104 for you guys in the US. I do like this spot for Austin Reeves. He's got a great matchup. There's also a chance LeBron doesn't play. And if he doesn't play, his line's going to move up to about 17.5. Now, Austin Reeves has covered this line in 25 of 41 games this season, averaging 15 points per game. He's recently been re-injected into the starting lineup, although even when he was coming off the bench, his minutes remained the same. Looking at how these teams match up, it's obvious that the Dallas Mavericks have the advantage in the backcourt, and the Lakers can dominate inside with Bron and AD. The Mavs, they lack size, and these are the types of matchups that AD normally dominates. He lit up the Mavericks for 37 points in their last matchup, and he finished with 0 assists in that game, which is crazy to me. Now, I just have this feeling, it's a tingling somewhere, that the Mavs, they're not going to let him work in single coverage. They're not going to let him torch them for 37 points again. So I think there's going to be more collapsing in the paint, and that's going to leave people like Taurean Prince and Austin Reeves wide open on the outside. As I mentioned earlier, the Mavs allow the most points to shooting guards over the last 15 games, and I'm hopeful Reeves continues to perform as he has in the past. In his last 5 games against the Dallas Mavericks, Reeves has covered this line in 4 of them, averaging 16 points per game. In those games, he played 30 minutes. He attempted 10 shots per game, which is what he's averaging over his last 10. So we're not asking for an uplift in his activity. We're just asking him to keep doing what he's doing and keep doing what he's done against the Dallas Mavericks. I'm expecting the same level of that, but I'm expecting him to get easier shots with AD causing havoc down low. So let's go, Austin. My last pick is a ladder play, and we're looking at Anthony Davis. We'll call this the assist ladder. So I'm taking him for 4, 5, 6, and 7 assists. I'll be very clear with how the units and the staking method is going here. So I've got 1.25 units for him to get over 3.5 assists, which is his line. I would normally put 2 units on that and call it a day. We're still contributing 2 units to this play, but we're going to spread it out across the ladder. So 1.25 units for him to cover his assist line. That's $1.86, which is minus 116. For him to get 5 assists, that's $2.95, which is plus 195. I've got a quarter of a unit. I've actually got a quarter of a unit on 5, 6, and 7. So I don't have to keep bloody going through that again. For 6 assists, I got that for $4.60, $4.90, which is plus $3.90. And for 7 assists, that's $8.50, which is plus $7.50. Now, for this play, I'm throwing the numbers out the window and I'm being guided by the tingles in my balls. So, AD's form against the Dallas Mavericks tells me that he's capable of hitting 4 assists. But I think the line is right. 3.5 seems like a great line for AD. He's capable of hitting 4 and he's capable of hitting 3. That's what that tells me. His last game, he finished on nothing, and I find that really strange. So he's covered in 2 of his last 4. That 0 assist matchup, he had 37 points. I've just got a strong vibe in my nether region that the Mavs don't allow that to happen again. I feel like they're going to force him to kick the ball out to wide open shooters, and they're going to cook him that way. Also, over his last 10 games, we've seen AD record 5+ assists in 5 games. He's averaging 4.7 assists over his last 10. The Mavericks, they allow the 8th most assists in the league. Now, whilst they only allow 4.4 assists to centers, not all centers that they play against demand the same type of attention that AD does. I did a dive into their last 2 weeks and the centers they played against. I would say that they've only matched up against 2 centers, which would even call for a double team or cause any problems inside. And that's been Jarrett Allen and Jonas Valanciunas. Now, Jonas Valanciunas had 7 assists when he played against them. Jarrett Allen had 6 assists. Now, neither of those guys can be mentioned in the same breath as AD. So the script in my mind and potentially in my balls tells me that Dallas collapsed the shit out of that inside, collapsed the shit out of Anthony Davis, and they force him to create for others. If I'm wrong, we lose 2 units, which is pretty standard for my props. But if I'm right, well, heck, I might be the luckiest son of a bitch on YouTube. So that's what I'm thinking for Anthony Davis. You just let me know if you want to play with it. I don't know. Having a little bit of fun here. But those are the bets. The preview's been done. Let's jump straight into the recap of the day that was. All right. So this is how the season is looking. These YouTube picks are up 61.4 units. We're hitting at over 13% as an ROI. January, we are back in the green. We're well on track to make it 4 consecutive months in a row. In that last video, what did I share? Firstly, we shared Joel Embiid over 32.5 points, had 2 units on that. I had 1 unit on B to score 40 points. So both of those cash and generate our only profit of the day. We said that if you're looking for the Jokic matchup, he's going to stick Kendrick Perkins' comments right up his ass. He's going to destroy Jokic, and he did. He was excellent, but everything went the way I wanted it to. Bradley Beal, though, did let us down. Ran a ladder on his 3-pointers. I don't even think he made one. He didn't get close to getting 20.5 points. I think he finished on 13. He shot quite poorly in this one. So this was just a bad read on my part. Positionally, the Kings were giving up points to shooting guards, and they gave up the most 3-pointers made, right? The one thing that I failed to take into consideration is that shooting guards, small forwards, especially in this Phoenix Suns team, they're relatively the same. Grayson Allen is a shooting guard. He's just playing next to Bradley Beal. And on RotoWire, he lines up at the 3. But he's not a small forward. So if I thought about who had the best matchup and how the Kings actually give up their points, if they're giving up the most 3-pointers made, it's not somebody handling the rock. Bradley Beal's not doing the catching and shooting. That's Grayson Allen. So Grayson Allen went absolutely ham today. As soon as that first quarter started and I checked the stats, I knew it. I was like, shit. I've made the wrong decision here. So Grayson Allen, he went off for 29 points in this game. He shot 9 from 14 3-pointers. And I'm kicking myself in the face for reading this one wrong. We could have had a real profitable day if I took the time to consider things properly, but I didn't. But look, overall, still had a profitable day. You got to learn from your L's. You got to take accountability for the shit bets that you make. But then you also got to take credit for the win. So I'm a fucking legend for picking Joel Embiid. You guys are fucking legends if you tailed as well. If you have subscribed, you're also a fucking legend too. But that's a wrap on this video. The preview is done. The bets are done. The recap's been done. What else is there to do? Oh, I've got to pay that song. So I'll catch you guys on the next one. Let me know what you guys think. Peace.
Sub to the channel cause your boy's getting busy. Coming to your line from the west side of Sydney. We've got the free picks and the juice on the daily. It's all free, you don't even have to pay me.